All right, for this last part, I did go ahead and put a second coat of paint on, and I think it looks a whole lot better. It came out really, really pretty, and I think this looks gorgeous just like this. But we want to do a little distressing for this so that all of the real details come out. And this is one of those tricky things where we're going to mix some paint. So I have the same brand. This is just burnt umber. And I'm going to give it a good shake again. Probably should have shook it before I turned on the video, but that's okay. We just want to give it a good shake. And then I'm going to pour some of this into here, and we're going to add some water to this. Whoops! And part of what I have a wet paper towel as well. So that will help a little bit. And then if you don't have one of these little spray bottles, I highly recommend them. They are awesome. And I just want to get this kind of a little bit more runny. So like right now, that's probably still way too thick for what we're doing. And I probably put too much in to begin with. So we're going to mix this around, and I'm probably going to have a ton of this left over, but that's okay. So you'll get it to where it starts to look a little bit runny. Let me see what this does on here. See, that's still too thick, but here's what I can do with this. I can mix a little bit of this into here. Let's see if we can save this. There we go. See how that's coming up a little bit more clear? So I'm going to start on the back because if I totally mess this up, I won't care. So I'm putting this on, and it's still a little bit thick. So, little trick I learned. We're going to take this and we're going to just spray it and let it drip. So I think I've got this a little too thick still. And then we're going to take the wet paper towel and kind of dab this back off. But we are going to go around the whole thing with this. So you can see that this was partly why I wanted to start at the back. And I think what I'm going to do is stop a second. I'm going to put this down because this is making a huge mess. So you're going to get to see the bloopers too, right? So I'm just going to kind of take this damp and rub a little bit because I don't like that I'm getting all these streaks running. Oh no, this ran all the way into here. So before this completely dries, I'm going to go back through here and kind of see if I can't rub this around a little better. So this isn't a total loss, but you know, we're learning some lessons here, I think. And that is really, really, really to make sure that you've got your brush good and cleaned out. So I want to really clean this brush out better. So if you accidentally do this and you really get your brush too full of paint, that's going to be part of the problem. I should have probably mixed this with something else. Let's see where we are now. I really want to get this good and wet. So that I can just take some and just kind of lightly go over this. It's kind of running, so I'm going to do just kind of a section like this, and then we're going to go back over it with our damp paper towel. And we want to just do little bits at a time. And I'm going to give it a good rub. So I may have to stop and go get some more damp paper towels. And you want to rub this off. So there, now it's looking better. That's looking more like kind of like dirt that's been kind of grunged into it. And so that's a lot better. So we're going to just do this area again. And I'm just kind of, we want to definitely work that in around the edges because that's where we want it to look really dirty. And then we're going to go over this again. And we're going to just take some of this off. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but I do recommend that you work quickly because as you can see, this is wanting to drip and we don't want it to build up too much in some places. So you may find that you have to actually go back and double check what you've got going on. Like this is still too thick around and I want to blend this better. There we go. Now that's blending better. All right, so now we're going to do this one. And again, try to get that down around the whole raised areas. And then you're going to kind of work it in, just like if this was, you know, dirt that was getting driven in. We want this to look a little bit dirty. So again, going around this. And because this is getting some of the paint in it, that's okay. It's kind of helping to blend things out a little bit better. And some areas may be darker than others. And that's okay because what we can do in the end is come back and dry brush this again with some white if it gets just too dark. Let's see, let's finish around here and get this part done. Just a little bit more. And then we'll do this part in the middle. So again, wiping it off and rubbing it in actually a little bit is probably good too. And you can see that you can just take some of that and ooh, I am loving how this is coming up now. And one of the things to remember is this brown is going to get darker as well. And you want to get down so that it's down into your, so you don't want to rub it all the way out. See how that really stands out? That looks really good, and that does too. So now, I'm going to get a little bit more out of there. That looks like there's just too much right in there. So now we're going to do the front parts, and just wait till you see how this all pops when we do this. So here's a bee. And I'm going to kind of go around all of it just to make sure that I've got it really well worked in there. And then we're going to come back, like I said, and just keep working this around it. We want to leave some of this brown paint, you know, down into the crevices so that you really see it. And like I said, if this is too brown, I can always come back and do it again with a little bit of white paint, and it will bring this color right back up again if this is just too dark. So as this dries, I may decide that this is too dark and I want to actually bring, I'm trying to see if I can get that out of there, and see if I can just bring some of the brightness back up again, because I feel like this has gotten a little overly grungy for my tastes. Oops. Well, let's go ahead and work this down into here too. That way we're getting it out equally. All right, so keep working this around. As you're working stuff out, you want to kind of really wipe and work it out. And let's go do this bee real quick. So as you can see, I used way too much paint to begin with, and this is starting to dry out a little bit, so I'm probably going to need to go back down in and get a little bit more water. So I'm going to spray this a couple more times again. And now we're going to do this last piece. I'm kind of starting in the middle, working my way out. Oh, that's interesting. Now it's starting to look a little bit more chocolatey, like milk chocolate. So by adding a little more water, I may have made this too light. There we go. All right, so now we're going to go back in. We're going to really wipe this down, kind of working some of the colors into some of the other places. So I recommend that if you do this, you have maybe a couple of wet paper towels, not just one or two, because it looks like I could have used a couple of extra ones. And actually, I have some handy dandy paper towels right here. I'm just going to wet down a new one using my spray bottle. And I'm just trying to get this damp anyway, so it helps. And we'll just use a fresh one. And now we're going to go over this a little bit better. Ooh, there we go. I think I'm going to spray this a little bit more. Seems a little bit dry. All right, here we go. So now we're going to go back over this again one more time. And we're going to see if we can work some of this out. Just a little bit. And I know that I definitely want to put a little bit more back down in there, because that just drew all of the darkness out, and I really don't want to take all of that out. I just want some of that out. So I'm not quite sure if I can just get a little bit of this paper towel down in there. Let's see if we can ball it up a little bit and get down in there so it's not quite so dark. So there may be something that's down in there that's causing this not to stick quite so well. And I'm not sure, but I think what I'm going to do is just go like this and a little bit like that. And so play with it until you really find that place that you like and how you like it. So I'm just going back over this part a little bit more with this damp cloth. And now we need to do the rest of this. So I am going to go ahead and brush this kind of evenly. And then hopefully what this is going to do is pull off some of that dark where it's stuck in, where it dripped. So again, I'm just rubbing this. I'm rubbing it pretty hard to try to work some of this back out again. Again, like I said, this may just require a little bit of, actually I'm going to try spraying this a little bit with water and see if I can't get that paint to let go a little better. There we go. Now it's coming up a little better. So sometimes you just have to play around a little bit and see if you can't fix your mistakes. And remember, there are no bad mistakes. There are happy mistakes. We call those happy accidents. And then just keep working it all the way around. So I will probably come back with some lighter, some white paint again, and go over these areas a little bit with some white paint. And that will really bring out and highlight things, because now I've got the brown kind of rubbed in. And this got a little bit streaky back here, so this may require just a wash of white again to really get this. I'm not quite sure. It's like wanting to stick in some places and not in others. So I'm not quite sure why it's streaking like that, but that's kind of the back, so I may not worry about that so much. Let's see if we can do this last little bit. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's clinging really dark to some areas and not to others. So let's just see if we can get this to work in a little bit better than what it's doing. So for some reason it looks like something has happened through here and in here that's just not allowing it to adhere. I don't know if I've just gotten that too wet or what. So I may have to come back and see, once it dries, we'll see if that makes any difference. So definitely want to make sure we're getting up underneath here as well, even though it won't be seen as much. So that is kind of where I am. I think I'm going to let this dry for a little bit and come back in a little bit there. Looks like I dabbed off too much there. So maybe we'll just play with this again later, and I may come through and dry brush this with the white. So you definitely want to take a look at where it's really dark. And do you like it? Do you want it? So this is supposed to look really old and dirty, almost like it's sat outside for a long, long time. All right, so I'm going to let this dry again, and I will probably come back and dry brush this a little bit. May do a little bit more touch-ups in a couple of different places. And we'll play with this a little bit more later. I'll try to figure out what went on here. All right, so I guess we've got a wee bit more and then this will be done. All right, everyone, we're back now, and I was able to do a little bit on the back here so I don't have the white spaces that I had before. I think what happened was that paint got really wet and then it became really smooth, and I think I took a lot of this, you know, you can see the really good sanded texture here, so a lot of that came off. Again, luckily this is the back. It's not going to be seen as much as the front. So we're down to the last thing we need to do, which is dry brushing. So again, we're going to just take our white paint, and this is going to highlight a lot of this and make the whole thing overall a slightly lighter color instead of quite so tan. In my mind, this is actually quite dark. And so you just start out with some of your white paint. And I'm going to use this bigger brush. This is a 1.5 inch brush, or no, it's a 1 inch angled brush. And my husband just buys these at the store. So what you want to do is you start out by taking off most of the paint. So you kind of dip it in and then you take off most of the paint again. And then you're just going to go real lightly over the top. And see how that's already kind of lightening things up a little bit. And then again, you dip it in, make sure you kind of brush it off. And we don't want to brush too much off, but we want to go over the tops of this and see how that already is much lighter than that. And they were about the same. So I'm just going to keep going now down the back, and we're just going. Again, it's dry brushing it. We want to get most of that paint off. And it doesn't really matter which direction you go. You may want to go a couple of different directions when you're doing this. So you're getting everything kind of real well covered. I guess that makes sense, maybe, sort of. But you don't want to take out you're not taking back out all of the wonderful deeper colors that you have. So sometimes you may find you have to kind of go in a couple of different directions just to make sure you get it all covered. So we're just going to keep going all the way around, and you can see this is what I call dry brushing. It's almost completely dry already. And so you may end up with, like, there's a big white spot. You could go back, I guess, with some paper towel and just kind of rub that back down so you get some of that back off and some of the brown will come through. But that's where it's really important to really make sure that you get all of that paint back off again. So, and just go real lightly. You don't want to go real hard. And that was probably the other mistake I made. I came down too hard on that. So we're not going to worry about that right now. And we're just going to keep going around the top parts, just real lightly. Again, you don't want to come down real hard with your brush or you're going to undo pretty much everything you've already done. And see how that brings out, now it really highlights and that little bee stands out really nicely. So you're just going to keep going back in and dry brushing all the way around. And this is a technique that I've seen a lot of different artists do. I see a lot of artists do this, especially on YouTube. I love to watch mixed media artists, and mixed media is just something I'm starting to really get into. I started out with junk journals, and that was really fun, and then I started watching some different YouTube channels of people who do mixed media, and I am hooked on this mixed media stuff. Wow, look at the crown. That looks so awesome. I cannot get over how dry brushing can make such a difference to just come back and finish an object, to finish something that it looked good before, but now it looks really amazing. And again, just kind of working that paint down in, not down in, you want to again really keep that paint more on the top parts. You don't want to get it down in the bottom where you've done all that work to create more of it's all about the contrast, I guess. And that's the really important part, is that you're getting some of that contrast in there. So I think this is the last little section we have to do, and I just need a wee bit more paint. But again, the advantage to dry brushing is it almost dries immediately. Because it's so dry, you've dried off your brush pretty much. And again, I'm just making sure that most of that is off, and we're just going to come back and forth. Both directions, go multiple directions, so you really get that worked into the top part. And I really want to come back down and work a little bit more into here, because you can see we've already done this part. So just real light. And I do want to get some of the parts, I missed some of these parts underneath. So making sure I'm getting some of these parts as well. Oops, I think I definitely want to go back to this part and do a little bit more. This seems like this is still really dark through here. So that's one of the kind of fun things about dry brushing you can do, is you can just keep going until you really get everything really more to what you like. It doesn't have to be as dark, and just keep adding it and going over and layering it until you get the effect or effect and effect. I never know what it is. I think it's effect. Anyway, I do want to get a little bit down in there, and we're going to go back over that just a little bit. Now the whole pot is much lighter. It's not as dark as it was, but it still has all of that wonderful grunginess that we want and want to see. Let's see if I can work that down just a little bit into there and a little bit into there. And voila! I think we're done. So last but not least, I'll show you what this looks like with the flowers back in it, and I will share a really nifty trick. So when I made this pot, when we started out, if you remember, I said that I had these really dusty old pansies. I mean, these pansies are literally 20 years old. And I probably need to kind of fluff, oops, I just pulled that off. I'll fix that in a minute. But I need to kind of fluff them back up again. But the easiest dusting trick ever, I had no idea. I'd read this somewhere and thought, you know what, I'm just going to try it. And what I did was I put them in a plastic bag and I sprinkled salt in the bottom of it, and I just shook the bag and it dusted it. It was the fastest, easiest way I could think of to dust pansies or to dust silk flowers. So there we have our finished pot. I'll go all the way around one more time so you can kind of see the whole thing all the way around. And then that's what it looks like with the pansies in it. I'm going to take my camera off for a second and see if I can get a little bit further away so you can see the whole thing. And I'm going to just turn this around. And there is what the pot looks like now with the pansies in it. So I hope you've enjoyed kind of crafting with me. Get a little better view of it there. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial and kind of more of a craft along with me. And that is the end of this, and I'm going to go display my pot now. So I hope I've inspired you to be creative today.